foundations of DevSecOps transformation. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. As a consultant, that's what I primarily do. I help organizations with their transformations efforts. So there's a diagram on the right. The playbook talks about the many things involved in, almost if you were to do absolutely everything almost, right? There's a lot of items on the diagram. It's a bit of an eye chart, but all of the things on the diagram are things that you might do for DevSecOps. It doesn't mean you have to do all of them for every application. Like we said before, your implementation for DevSecOps should be proportional to whatever the risk and threats are for your applications. Okay, so the first thing is, as it says on the header of the chart, start where you are. It seems kind of obvious when you say it that way, but believe me, a lot of organizations seem to want to jump into the middle without really understanding where they are properly, and then they start implementing things that maybe they didn't need to, or maybe get some things ahead of other things that they should have done. So it's a serious point. It's not a facetious comment. So certainly understand where you are, I would say, is implied by the statement, and that's certainly true. I often find, again, in my consulting work, that people kind of want to jump into it, but without really taking the time to properly understand where they are relative to either their own expectations or industry norms and things like that. But unless you do that, you're really not going to have a proper plan, or at least not an efficient one. So first of all, know where you want to go. In other words, have a vision, have a set of goals, create a shared vision and objectives. That's easier said than done. It's not just a matter of writing down, hey, we want DevSecOps. You really need to think about in depth what is it that you're trying to do. So that could involve threat modeling and comparisons with industry standards for your type of application and so on. Try to understand what is it that you're really going to try to accomplish, and not only in the immediate but in the longer term. Before changing anything, realize where you are. So do some kind of gap analysis. There's other tools to help you understand where you are. There's I know in my own practice I have something called a maturity capabilities assessment, gap analysis. A number of consultants have things like that to help you understand where you are relative to where you think you should be. Also, other discovery surveys, different kinds of assessments, looking at your measures where you think you've got problems from things you're already measuring. Look at whatever contextual data you have, what's been repeatable, where you've had events and problems, talking to people, sensing sessions, interviews, both internal and external to the organization, looking at your problem lists. So there's a lot of data that you can look at, and a particular exercise that is extremely valuable, and I certainly don't recommend you skip over it. In fact, I recommend you do it periodically for every application, is a value stream mapping exercise where you sit down as a team, cross-functional team, security people, dev, product owner, QA, ops people, tools people, sit down together and look at your value stream map, which is, if you haven't done that, I strongly recommend you learn about it and do it, because it is so invaluable. So the very short version of a value stream map is it's a visual representation of the different major steps in your stream of activities that you use to create value for customers. So starting typically with looking at how do things get into the backlog of your work, what does development do, what happens in integration and delivery and deployment and operations, and all the things involved. Now, you may have a more complicated, detailed one or less, right? It's really up to your organization how you want to represent that, but it's simply a serial diagram like that, not that much more complicated than what I'm showing here. And then you add some details like how long does it take in every one of these steps, and what are the rejection rates between steps, what's the wait time between steps. And when you do that and you really sit down together and do that, and you look at it from a security point of view in particular, where are you getting, are you looking at security properly in each of these steps? And can you identify when you've got security issues that are moving from one step to the other, and all of these different points, right? You start to learn a lot about your own application. So that's going to really help you to understand where you are now. And furthermore, it's going to help you think about where you might want to make changes in your value stream, including the pipeline. Okay, there's entire workshops and courses on that, so we're not going to dwell on it here, but I recommend you learn about it. So there's a lot to, understand, no doubt about it. This diagram, I think, actually comes from a vendor, as I recall, but the idea is relevant whether it's a product or vendor. This looks like a value stream platform type of generic diagram where, you're looking at all the different elements of what creates value and what are you going to do with the results, and all of the above are relevant for DevSecOps. So you look at intake for projects, test environments, project teams, compliance requirements, status requests. Those are all providing you input. And then you look at your processes, the releases, system applications, the environments, process changes and projects, activities and stakeholders, your different approval processes, audits. Collect that from actual data from different tools. So ITSM, test development, application lifecycle management tools, project management tools. There's a lot of places where you can get data from. And also the outputs are relevant. What are you doing with that data? How are you processing it for insights, analytics, governance, and notifications and things. So planning and scheduling, coordinating environments, managing changes, ensuring alignment, providing change visibility, construct and scope releases, arbitrate conflicts, track activity progress, ensure compliance, and mitigate risk. So the whole diagram is, is relevant for DevSecOps and trying to understand what data you're really going to determine, what to use for basing your DevSecOps solution for one application. You really ought to consider the whole set of things while you're doing that. It's not a trivial effort, but if you skip it, then and just dive into implementation, you may find that you're working on really the lower priority thing than you thought. Development center security. So start with really making sure development teams understand the security and feel a level of responsibility for security. It's no doubt there's a lot of elements in security, right? We've talked about many of them, and it's not an exhaustive course. This is really a fundamentals course. So, even the fundamentals are hard to get right. Developers are not expected to be security experts, but they shouldn't be unaware. They need to be informed and taught and trained about security. Help simulate conversations, meaning with each other, but also with security experts, so that they can be learn about cybersecurity and all the different things we talked about. Things like this course itself is a good way to do that. Make sure there's collaboration facilitated between security experts and developers. It shouldn't happen just by happenstance. It should be a deliberate activity that's not just planned, but part of the culture. That can be rewarded, motivated to make sure that not only happens, but keeps happening. Supporting tool platforms. So the idea of platform engineering, you can build in security processes and standards and so on into the platforms so that a lot of the concerns are taken care of as the developers are using their platforms. And providing a blame-free culture. So again, we're talking about culture to make sure that developers feel competent and confident to discuss security concerns, report incidents and so on without thinking they're going to get blamed for problems that might occur.